Good afternoon. I'm Ed Pozzuoli, CEO of Tripp Scott, and with us is our old friend and Congressman from Northern Florida, Mike Waltz. Mike, welcome.
Thank you.
Mike, you wrote a book, Hard Truths, to think like a Green Beret, and it tells stories about when you were a Green Beret and the mission, some of the missions and some of the things that you learned. Tell us about that a little bit.
Well, Green Berets are unique in that we have to embed with, in local villages and valleys and tribes and partner militaries and learn the language and blend in. And I talk about all the lessons I learned trying to corral the tribes in Afghanistan and in Africa and the direction America needed them to go, and then how I've applied those lessons to what I call the tribes of the swamp up in DC, which many days I think are harder to corral. But these are life lessons that can be applied to business, can be applied to friends, to family, and what makes a Green Beret unique in terms of bottoms-up leadership, having an adaptive mindset, being resilient, being disciplined, not only how we get through some of the toughest training in the world and how we get through combat, but then, with less than 1% of America serving now, I think it's kind of our duty to capture those lessons for our everyday Americans and their lives and how they can apply them.
Given your experience, put in context for us what's going on in the Middle East with Israel and Hamas and the approach that the Biden-Harris administration is now taking compared to what they might have otherwise done.
Well, they've just had a fundamentally wrong and frankly, in some ways, just ridiculous strategy from day one. The strategy has been pressure Israel to do less, and we just never let them win and eliminate these threats, where really the core issue is Iran and its money. Iran's money is behind Hezbollah, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis that are shutting down global shipping in the Red Sea. These groups are acting as Iran's proxies. President Trump had maximum pressure in place, which shut off their cash, shut down their oil, had their currency tanking. And all of these terrorist groups just a few years ago were complaining that they couldn't pay their fighters and couldn't buy weapons. We have to go back to that maximum pressure on Iran, and until we do, they're just going to help all of these groups rebuild no matter how hard Israel hits them. So we've got to get to the core issue. And look, the Iranian people are screaming or crying or protesting for freedom. We should support them more, much like we did dissidents against the Soviet Union. The thing these regimes fear the most, and this is again the mindset of the Green Beret, we specialize in unconventional warfare and guerrilla warfare, and our motto is to free the oppressed. The thing these regimes fear the most, whether it's in Beijing or Tehran or Moscow or Pyongyang, is its own people. And the more we help people that are crying out for freedom and are resisting these regimes, the more these regimes are looking over their shoulder rather than attacking us all over the world.
What is, as an example, use this idea of shutting off Iran's money as being impactful on the war against their proxies, essentially.
Right.
Is the same hold true for Russia and opening up the spigot to allowing Russian gas to come into Europe?
No, it absolutely does. And the thing that is so damn frustrating, Russia is selling and moving just as much oil and gas now as it did before the invasion of Ukraine. They're just doing it through India and China. So if we would simply flood the world with our U.S. cleaner oil and gas, you drive down global markets, you drive down the price because you've now flooded the world with supply. Putin would be on his back foot economically. He literally wouldn't be able to afford to produce. His war machine would dry up, and so would Iran's too. Oh, by the way, you solve a huge part of our inflation problem here at home. And this really illustrates how the left's kind of climate obsession, like we all want clean air and water, of course. But this climate obsession has us shutting down American production and then relying on Iran, Venezuela, Russia, and the bad guys' production, which is literally, it's our cash, it's Chinese cash buying their oil that's fueling their war machine.
And so we shouldn't be surprised when the bad guys make some money on oil and gas and then spend it on some bad things.
Yeah, right.
That's really what it comes down to.
That's better said. right? The sad thing is, just a few years ago, in the last administration, President Trump said it in his own way, but he looked at China and said, if you're going to keep buying from Iran, you can't buy from us. And you know what? China stopped buying from Iran. Their cash dried up. The terrorists couldn't pay their fighters, couldn't buy weapons. And we had peace deals being signed on the White House lawn in the Abraham Accords. Now look at the Middle East.
The Middle East and Russia aside, what's the greatest threat to the United States?
Well, it is undeniably the Chinese Communist Party. Never in our history, Ed, have we faced an adversary with an economy as large as ours, a military that is building up rapidly, and has the ability to choke off supply chains, whether it's chips, pharmaceuticals, rare earth minerals, and on down the list, that could make our economy go dark. I talk in the book about how President Trump saw our vulnerabilities in space, the fact that our entire economy is dependent on our constellations up there. The Chinese have developed the capability to take them out, which would send our economy back into the dark age.
Yeah, let me stop on that. Explain for people watching why space is so integral part of our economy.
Yeah.
I think that's sometimes lost.
It is lost, and literally you can't see it, so it's hard to appreciate that. From commercial agriculture to GPS, trucking, rail, global shipping, of course communications,
and
weather, military, the military's ability to do precision munitions and shoot, move, and communicate all over the world is all dependent on our satellites in space. That used to be just a place we dominated. The Russians were kind of up there, but the Chinese in particular have developed space weapons to take those constellations out. It would send our economy dark. And every war game, the first shots are fired in space and in cyber. So not only are they developing the capability to take our space assets down that our economy is dependent on, they're also developing the cyber capabilities to take out our water, our grid, our pipelines, our ports. This is incredibly serious. We've got to secure those supply chains, bring them back home, and get ready for what Chairman Xi, the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, talks about as his quest to replace the United States as a global leader.
So with all that said, we're now, this discussion is now taking place essentially a week before the election. What are your thoughts about where the race is now?
So I've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Somehow we know that, right?
Yeah, well, I don't think for a second that the likes of Kim Jong-un, Chairman Xi, Vladimir Putin are going to respect and fear Kamala Harris. And that's not a misogynist statement. That has nothing to do with anything but the fact that her administration, Biden's administration, have shown an appeasement first, a concessions first approach. They've shown weakness in the White House, and that's the very reason our enemies are on the march. They are emboldened by perceived weakness. They're deterred by strength. It's an undeniable fact that Putin invaded a neighboring country under Bush, Obama, and Biden, but not under Trump. It's an undeniable fact, the pivot in our national security apparatus to deal with China. And the fact that he secured the border with terrorism that's enjoying a resurgence now because of the withdrawal from Afghanistan and how that was done. For these reasons and many more, right. We need a commander-in-chief that our enemies respect and fear, and that our military feels like has their back.
But what about those folks who say, Trump is, he has some mean tweets, he says some things that don't sit well with some people. What do you say to that? I mean, what do you say to those that are looking at his words or his actions? What
I tell you, get over it. Let's look at what he did. Let's look at once-in-a-generation tax reform, once-in-a-generation justice reform. Veterans have been asking for veterans' choice. Just go to your local doctor rather than driving hours to a VA for decades. He got it done. The pivot and everything that he did for Israel, moving the embassy, recognizing Golan, the Abraham Accords, the Remain in Mexico, getting the same Mexican government that Biden's dealing with to put their National Guard to secure Mexico's southern border, and on and on. The new NAFTA deal. I mean, it is amazing what he got done.
Is there a list like that
Despite what was
Vice President Harris
thrown at him?
Probably not.
Well, if there is, she can't find it because she certainly hasn't been able or willing to articulate it, right?
Right.
She won't run away from Biden, in that disaster. Nobody wants a Biden second term. That's why they replaced him. But she can't articulate what she's running towards. This is, the new way forward. Well, what is that besides a slogan?
Yeah, turn the page.
Yeah, exactly. From themselves.
Right.
That, obviously they're the incumbent. So look, I think they're going to throw everything they can at them in the next week. But people are voting with their pocketbook, with their family's security, and with the nation's security in mind. And at the end of the day, voting on actions, not rhetoric, I think is what's going to put him over the line.
And what's next for you, Congressman?
Well, I'm looking for re-election. And we'll see what happens with President Trump. I absolutely think he's going to win and be the next commander-in-chief. And if he calls me to serve, he calls me to serve. Otherwise, we'll see. We'll see. I am not saying no. We are certainly thinking about the governorship. It's a serious job, 15th largest economy in the world, but we'll make that decision in the spring.
Well, protect Florida as great as it is.
Look, as we've seen from Venezuela to California, you can screw it up, right? And I think there's a lot to think about and kind of what is Florida 3.0 after what Rick Scott has done, what Ron DeSantis has done. What's that next step for our state in terms of growth? And I think it's very exciting. We have to grow smartly. Miami is poised to be the Dubai of the Western Hemisphere, the amount of capital that's flowing through. I really think I'm excited about whoever replaces Ron DeSantis taking the state to the next level. And as a native Floridian, that's really fun.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I want to thank you so much, not only for your service, but for spending some time with us today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ed.